On Law Weekly, we talk yet again about the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen, and the options open to President Muhammadu Buhari on his issue. We have the views of a senior advocate of Nigeria, Professor Ajayi. Also showing on the program today, lawyers set their agenda for the president-elect. Issues of power, security, and infrastructure make the list. Plus our recap of the top trending stories from the courtrooms. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Shola Shuyeli. Last week on the show, we had some lawyers share their views on the decision of the National Judicial Council, NJC, on the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Onnoghen. We had a lot of feedback, with many wondering what would happen next and the implications of all of this on the judiciary. To deepen the discussions, I spoke to a professor of law and a senior advocate of Nigeria, Professor Ajayi. I began by asking his views on the decision of the NJC and then Justice Onnoghen's counteraction.
Chief Awomolo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, who is counsel to Justice Onnoghen, has come out to say that Justice Onnoghen resigned. The honest truth is that the reason given by Chief Awomolo is something that probably ought to have operated on the mind of Justice Onnoghen when this started, which is, he says, in order to save the judiciary, in order to ensure that the judiciary is not itself impaled on the horns of the law, that this major arm of government is not dragged, as it were, through a dock, not of a superior court of record, but of a tribunal, which, is under the presidency. So it's absolutely sad, indeed, that we had to go through all that. And honestly, good public administration, suggests that Justice Onnoghen ought to have resigned, and that would be what I would do. And you could say, well, the allegations against him are not true, but that's not the point. If you're Pope, you cannot afford to get into any situation that would lead to any form of allegation of this type being made against you. But having said so, we understand that NJC has recommended retirement. They could have recommended dismissal and prosecution. So if it's retirement, then that's great saving for Justice Onnoghen. Now, all this is about what some people think is the greatest problem in the country: corruption. And in order to get at this result, the president seemed to have just finished reading The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, who says that the end justifies the means, and that therefore, as long as what you aim to do is right, how you get there is irrelevant. And there's a lot of debate about that. But I think on my part that he ought to read the letter from Birmingham by Martin Luther King Jr., who said, yes, the means justifies the end, but the means and the end must both be good and worthy. And the point really is this: it is corrupt, and probably a worse form of corruption, to use the machinery of government unlawfully, illegally, or inappropriately. So our president, by public statement, said, as a result of an ex parte order by a tribunal, he was suspending the CJ. Now, that is totally outlandish. And now, so we know the president is really up against corruption. But I'm not sure that the way to fight corruption is by corruption itself, because it is absolutely corrupt to ignore the rule of law, as the president said at the NBA conference last year, where he says that, well, there are some things that are more important than the rule of law. Now, that just cannot be correct, because the rule of law is the basis on which society, is able to carry on. It's the only way in which there will be no totalitarian government. So Hitler sought a good end for his German people, and his means was killing others. America sought to end the war, but by bombing innocent people. And it was through the machinery of the law that Putin is now the kind of dictator he is today. Through the machinery of the law, that Saddam Hussein was able to attain the height to which he got to. It was through the machinery of the law that Idi Amin became what he became. So we have to be very careful when a president disobeys court orders, or acts in a manner that rides roughshod of the system. It just cannot be right. The same thing could have been done, but I would say that it should be done in accordance with the law. Otherwise, we would all be in trouble.
I hear what you say about the president, but I want to go back to the NJC. Now, there are those who have the perception that the NJC has been ineffective in exercising disciplinary measures, especially where it concerns high-ranking judicial officers. And so they say that this latest decision on Justice Onnoghen is designed to give him a soft landing. I mean, you've also alluded to the fact that they could have recommended his dismissal or even prosecution, but instead they've said that he be retired. What do you think?
I think one thing is that the public seems not to be well informed about what is going on and about the fight against corruption. The only arm of government that is really fighting corruption well is the judiciary. Because you'd ask yourself, how many legislative officers have been dealt with by the legislature on account of corruption? How many people has this government dealt with that are in the executive of this government against corruption? But check it out. For many years now, the judiciary has been retiring, dismissing, suspending, and otherwise disciplining judges. So the only arm of government that has actually done something serious against its own is the judiciary. Is it sufficient? Absolutely not. Should it do more? Certainly yes. And I should say that depending on what is found and what the evidence is, there could still be prosecution of an officer that is retired. See, because the important thing is this, that we cannot afford to have the Chief Justice of the Federation in person, in office, suspended or otherwise, sitting in the dock, and going back to the bench to adjudicate cases. You see, what this does is erode the confidence and integrity of the bench altogether. Because then there is the accused who says, well, CJ, what's the difference between you and I? So it should never come to this stage where a serving judge is made to do these things. When it comes to it, honestly, if a judge gets to the point where he's going to be charged to court, he should resign. Because it's no longer about him, it's about the judiciary.
But legally speaking, what are the options open to the president who has the NJC's decision on one hand and Justice Onnoghen's letter on the other hand? What are the legal options open to him?
Some would say that a letter of retirement or resignation is not effective until it is accepted, but I don't think that is so. Because the law is that you cannot compel anybody to work for anybody because it's not a slave. I can walk away from any job at any time. I can resign as the president of Nigeria now, and there's nothing anybody can do about it. So if I resign from my office and my employer thinks that I have done something absolutely wrong, you say, well, that's fine, yeah, resign, But by the way, I would have dismissed you. And by the way, these are the things that you've done. So you've gone, it's not a problem. But I'm going to report you to the police. Now, but the point is slightly academic now, because he has resigned or he has retired, he has left office, he's not going back there. He can't act as a judge again. So there's no question of following the constitutional or legal procedure for the removal of the CJN. So it's really academic. So the president cannot now say, I'm not accepting resignation.
Now, talking about the acting CJN, do you think he has no culpability, as we hear that the NJC has decided?
This same NJC has ruled in the past that a judge that accepted to be sworn as chief judge without the recommendation of NJC is in breach of the rules, has engaged in infamous conduct and should be retired. And that's what happened in Abia State, where there was a quarrel between, I think, the governor and the chief judge. He got him removed, sworn this new person. And in the same way, this judge felt, well, there's a vacuum, and I don't want to create a vacuum, and accept it. But NJC said, but nobody can accept that office without our recommendation. In the past in this country, in Rivers State, the courts were locked up by Amici. They couldn't operate.
The Minister for
Transport.
When he was governor.
Yes. And the question was, who swears in the governor? And went to court and they said, okay, another CJ from another state would do it. Meaning that indeed there could be a vacuum.
Do you agree with those who say that perhaps the NJC was hasty in sending its decision to the president, that perhaps they should have waited for the court cases to be decided one way or another?
No, I don't think so. As a matter of fact, if I was NJC, I wouldn't even go to bed at all. And I would treat this with the greatest urgency that it deserves. So, if anything, it will be that the NJC did not act quickly enough, rather than say, it took time. This is one of those cases where you tell counsel that I want you to address me on a daily basis, and we'll give our ruling immediately, we'll give our reasons later, because it's a matter of fundamental constitutional importance that goes to the roots of society and our rule of law.
Now, for the acting CJN or substantive CJN, when it's eventually confirmed, what do you think that it can do to sanitize the judiciary?
Whoever the next CJN is, my hope is that such person would be, on the one hand, a philosopher that brings to bear policy considerations, changes the approach of the Supreme Court from being a court that just more or less parrots itself, constantly only consistent in being inconsistent, not moving the needle of the law. In other words, helping to build society, helping to shape commerce, bringing us in line with the age in which we live. These are the signals that I expect to see from the Supreme Court. And if you get that, it begins to trickle down. The Supreme Court needs to, in my view, be firmer, more courageous in its approach, less afraid of government, and demonstrating its independence and assuming the position as the most important in society, more important than the office of the president, more important than the legislature, because the legislature makes the law, the judges don't. The executive execute the law, the judges don't. But what they do at the end of the day is determined by the courts. It is what the court says is the law that is the law. So they are the last door. They have said they are infallible and they are like God. And indeed, they are like God's representatives on earth. So, as far as this plane is concerned, they are the last hope of man. And they know, as they've told us in their cases in the past, that this is the raw nerve that society looks at. Because if you have no confidence in them, then they have no power at all.